Only one way to find out. Trial and error.
Exactly.
So yeah, welcome everyone to who is with us right now in the Zoom room, and for those of you who will be watching the recording of this, so with myself, Jane Dancey, and my colleague Jacqueline. So if I'll just introduce myself, and then I'll let Jacqueline you introduce you about what you do. So I'm a somatic yoga teacher, a coach, and I work a lot with the female pelvis, as well as perimenopause and some other bits and pieces as well. And I've been delivering an online course, the embodied female pelvis, for a number of years now, and every time that I run it, I start looking at different layers come into the exploration, because it is a very vast subject. And I have a workshop coming up on Wednesday next week at the 24th, and it's from 12:30 to 2:30, and that's UK time. And I know, Jacqueline, you've got something coming up, and so we decided to do this talk together because it's about the pelvis and pain. And Jacqueline, at this point, do you want to introduce yourself and about what you're doing, and then that will make sense to people on.
Yes, I would love to. So firstly, this is the second time that we're having a conversation together, and I'm so excited about that because we both have so many topics in common that we love to share and talk about. But I come from the world of yoga for women's health, and the modality of yoga for women's health really puts the woman and her health journey at the center of yoga practice. And part of yoga for women's health is really understanding the different pathologies or different things that a woman can experience throughout her life cycle. And the focus for yoga for women's health is the pelvis. And really, we learned that when we think of the center of a body, sort of the structure of a body, we often think of the center being the chest or the stomach. We never really think of the center of a body being the anatomy of a body being the pelvis. But as you know, and as I know through my studies and through the work that we both do, is that really the anatomical center of a body is the pelvis. And for a woman or anyone with a uterus or reproductive organs, that has a profound way that they relate to their body, that their body speaks to them, that they are impacted by health issues, and specifically reproductive issues, all comes through the pelvis and the way the pelvis communicates with the body. So I'm actually going to be doing my workshop on Sunday, looking at endometriosis, PCOS, which people may think are, women's health issues, without any real connection or relationship to the pelvis as an anatomical sort of part of the body. But as we know, everything that happens to a female body really starts in the pelvic area. And the fact that these are reproductive pathologies, they are specifically women or anyone with a uterus or ovaries pathologies, and those organs are housed within the pelvis, means that it is a pelvic issue. And I think that that's something that we're going to talk about a lot, because that is sort of the overlap between what you do and what I do. So yes, so my workshop is on Sunday, and we'll add information to your workshop and my workshop in the comments so that everyone can look at that and can register for those. But I think that is sort of why our conversations are so interesting, because you're coming at it from one angle and I'm coming at it from another angle, and we really have a great meeting point in the middle.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jacqueline. And the fact is that these pelvic issues are I see them on the rise, and I see it actually happening with to women at a younger age as well. And it's it is really useful knowing your way around some of these. You know, you're not going to know all of it, because there's so many things that go on in the pelvis. Yeah, like Jacqueline was saying, it's like the epicenter of the female body. It is where all rites of passage move through. So, you know, I never put myself in that place of being the pelvic super expert of knowing everything, because there is so much. It's such an intricate part. But one of the things that I do know about the female pelvis is that it can be a place of great potential. Oh, it can be a place of great potential pleasure on one hand, yeah. On the other hand, so much potential for pain. And this is like all opposites, polarities. It's a really tricky one to hold. And there might be stages of a woman's life when they can connect to that idea of pleasure, and there'll be other times when it's very much about pain. And so the way that I look at the female pelvis in general, and especially when looking at pain, is that I come from a biopsychosocial perspective. So putting that simply is bio, the body, the physical, the biomechanics, like what's going on, posture, movement patterns, what have you. And then psycho is the psychological aspect, the emotions, the stories, and that this is huge to a huge component to the pelvis. And then the social, so the environment that we are born into, that we live in, and all those different layers of social media, blah blah blah. It's huge. And there's also other layers. They're the ones that I would say first, but there's the soul layer, there's the spiritual, and ancestral, and trauma weaves through all of those. So trauma isn't in the domain of one. It kind of interweaves and interacts and moves through all of it, and is I think pretty much probably weaves through most, if not all, female pelvises. If you think about the pelvis is a place of potential, it's a place of entry. So that brings up ideas of consent and boundaries, and that's obviously another huge part of it.
So I love what you're saying, because which is why I love having these conversations with you, because everything you've talked about is 1,000% correct. And for some women, they may not necessarily understand what that means to them on a very practical level. And that's why I think the work that I do is so complementary to you, and my workshop is so complementary to you, because we bring it down to the actual pathologies: endometriosis, PCOS, PMS, even things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or anything like that. Those are the practical manifestations of everything that you just expressed. So a woman could be experiencing, for example, endometriosis and be undiagnosed. As we know, it can take between 7 to 11 years for a woman to be diagnosed with endometriosis. And in that time, she potentially can be suffering in the pelvic area without maybe necessarily even using the word pelvis. She may use the word abdomen or ovaries or uterus, and the word pelvis won't potentially even come up in the language by her or by her medical professionals who are supporting her. But it is the pelvis, and the pelvis plays such an important role in that pathology and in all of the pathologies that I mentioned. And I think that when we add all of your insights to those discussions, it changes the way a woman begins to understand what she's going through, relate to what she's going through, look for ways to manage or support or treat whatever it is she's experiencing. And I think it really adds another layer of depth to the discussion, and to giving validity to the woman's journey and to the woman's experience. Because specifically with these pathologies, and I find it very interesting with, and I'm only thinking about it now as we're talking, with pelvic health and these pelvic, let's call them pelvic pathologies like endometriosis, PCOS, PMS, the list can go on. They are always seen in a hormonal context, an endocrine context, a disease context, a symptom context, and the woman suffers in that sort of framework. But maybe if we can change the language a little bit, change the frame of reference for what she's going through, understand it in a deeper way, that either may help her and her engagement or communication with herself about the pathologies, about what she's experiencing, and may give her totally new insight into how we can manage it. Because as we know, the medical treatment today for these women who are suffering in these ways is really very, very insufficient.
Yeah, absolutely, Jacqueline. And that really reminds me of how a lot of the time when women go to the doctor, go to the gynae around these things, it's very much seen in one sphere. It's seen through one window of maybe the physical, and not just even the whole physical body, but just that part, even just that part of the pelvis, not even the other parts of the pelvis. And that comes at a great cost, because obviously we are these interconnected organisms, and with pelvic, like every body-based issue, with the pelvic issues, it's really essential to look through the different lenses and to look at the whole body, and then to look at what else is going on, and so on. And one of the ways that I work with pain and the pelvis is I start off with mapping the pelvis and actually checking into what each individual woman's knowledge of her own anatomy is, and there's a very distinct lack of proper education on pelvic anatomy. A lot of the time the medical anatomy books don't have it quite right, because it's based on the male pelvis. It might be that the average doctor doesn't know that much. Even the average female pelvic floor physio in this country anyway doesn't always know the whole picture. It's quite a small slice and quite outdated information. So first of all, education and mapping, and really getting to know one's own pelvis, and doing it step by step, doing it trauma informed, and really sensitive to where each individual is and what feels okay, with starting with just what's it like to bring your awareness to the pelvis. And it might be for a lot of women there is no awareness, because it is a place of the potential shame, disassociation, and what have you, and trauma. And
I also think that most women don't know, as you said, they don't know their pelvis. They also don't know how their pelvis changes throughout their life cycle. If you have children, your pelvis changes. As you go into menopause, things change. So not only your pelvis doesn't stay the same throughout your 80, 90 years on this planet, or 100 years on this planet. It changes, and the as you very correctly said, the anatomical implications of those changes, but also the emotional, mental, spiritual, social changes that all those represent.
Absolutely. I was listening to someone that I really like following, Kimberly Ann Johnson, who works a lot around female sexual health. She's a sexological body worker and a SE practitioner. And she was saying about how she was advising women that before they gave birth to actually take a snapshot of their own vulva, so that if there was trauma, physical trauma afterwards, they could actually say, look, this is what my vulva looked like before birth, because every one of our vulvas will look slightly different, and that's one of the issues, is like, how do we have self-agency, and can we advocate for ourselves in the medical realms if we don't know ourselves, if we don't know our own anatomy? That spoke volumes to me.
Yeah, in that vein, I also recently was listening to a podcast where they were talking about the male anatomy that is very visible, very there. You don't need to look for it. But the female anatomy is very, apart from breasts, obviously, but the reproductive female anatomy is very hidden anatomically. And so with that hidden, that you can go in all different directions with it, but unfortunately for a lot of our culture and language and, you know, sort of social discourse, that hidden means shame, embarrassment, lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, lack of understanding. And so it's very interesting what you said, because it sort of connects up to that the way that the anatomy actually is has created in our Western culture a narrative around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on a very practical level, it means that it's not well mapped neurologically, because like when the little boy looks down and sees his penis, he can feel it, and the mother or the caregiver might say, oh, penis, willy. Little girls don't get that so much, so it's not actually neurologically mapped in the brain, so it's much more of an unknown piece of our body. And that means that if there is pain in my vagina, around my vulva, if I don't have it well mapped, either through touch, neurologically, it's going to be much harder for me to be very specific about where I am feeling pain, what those pain sensations are like, and use the correct terminology to get that across to whoever I need to get it across. So it's a huge, important piece of work.
I also think we have to mention that the pelvis holds other anatomy. It holds the rectum, it holds the bladder, it holds other things also, which we also need to consider when we're looking at pain and women's health, because it's not just about the reproductive organs. There are other organs that are housed within the pelvis, and the pelvis is also attached at the sacroiliac joint to the lower back and the spine. And so you may experience pain in specific areas and not even necessarily realize that it may be pelvis related. You know, digestive problems, constipation, prolapse, all these things are pelvic issues also.
And of course, like there's now much more discussion about incontinence. That's kind of coming out a little bit more. It's becoming a little bit more okay to talk about it in terms of incontinence, peeing myself. No one really talks about pooing themselves. You know what? If incontinence is happening with it's gonna
with the urethra and bladder
as well. So you know, I really like to talk about the rectum, and you know, like when I do my mapping thing, visualizations about bringing hand towards the bladder, and some appreciation to what the bladder does, and then a hand at the back to connect in with the rectum, and showing a bit of love to that very shadowy part of us.
Well, Anna, I actually think the problem is the reverse, is constipation. Tight muscles, tension. We haven't discussed at all about tension and muscles and the impact of that on our women's health, pelvic health. But I know I have a pelvic floor therapist friend, and she talks about the people coming to her because they're constipated, and the work of pelvic floor diaphragm and all that, and the muscles that support the pelvis and the internal organs, and what's going on there, and the role of stress. And I think that definitely from a women's health perspective, the role of stress cannot be underestimated in its impact on women's health issues, specifically endometriosis and PCOS. The additional stress that women encounter when they are suffering with those pathologies, and when there is pain in the pelvis.
They create a
loop.
And it's still being said that if there's this instant jump to, oh, my pelvic diaphragm is loose, therefore I need to do Kegels. Probably isn't loose, it's probably tight, because most people have a dysregulated nervous systems, and have so many people have stress and anxiety running through their systems, especially now, after the last couple of years, that there's probably going to be tightness and pulling in, especially with if people have been doing a lot of Mula Bandha and strong yoga practices, even Pilates. And so if then they are instructed to do more Kegels on top of that, that creates a lot of confusion in those tissues, and then more instability throughout the whole fascia connection web of it all.
Yeah, I'm sure you talk about in your workshop, and when you discuss the anatomy, that the pelvis is bone, but it's also connected by muscles. And I think that I'm actually at the moment teaching yoga for pregnancy group, and they know that their body is changing, they know their pelvis is changing, they know there is stress bearing down. But I said to them just last week, the pelvis is actually a bone. Bones don't stretch. It's the muscles that stretch. But at the end of the day, your pelvis is made up of bones, and those don't stretch, and when you think about it, specifically in pregnancy, because that's when the pelvis potentially undergoes most trauma, the pelvis needs to support everything that is changing in a woman's body without actually itself changing, or trying to navigate how it is going to change to accommodate what is going on. And I think that, pregnancy is obviously a very specific time in the pelvis life cycle, but it does have major implications.
Absolutely. And then, of course, what goes on in pregnancy and postnatal, then when a woman starts going through perimenopause, those little vulnerabilities can pop up again, as I experienced myself, of like a sort of minor prolapse of postnatally, and then again in perimenopause, of just those shifting sand times of the potential vulnerability, and a calling to take care and to increase intimacy and awareness, which is like the bedrock of my practices, of like connection, intimacy, awareness.
And bringing reversing the relationship from a pain relationship to a loving relationship, I guess, with your pelvis.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, the fact is that there is a proportion of pain that is not in the tissues. It is in our, it's being created through the nervous system, through the fight, flight, freeze. It's a response to stress, anxiety, whatever. So to unpick those patterns as well, just like we can get it, achy shoulders or a funny elbow, our stories and our histories, our trauma can create psychosomatic stuff.
Totally. So we have some people here joining us live in Zoom. I don't know if anyone here who's joining us live in Zoom wants to ask any questions or wants to comment about what you've heard so far. I know we are live in Facebook, so if you want to protect your privacy, you can just put questions in the chat and we will just read the questions out anonymously. If you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, Jane and I would be super happy to answer anything that has come up for you as we've been talking. Maybe while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, Jane, maybe just remind everyone when your workshop is again, and then I'll remind everyone when my workshop is again.
Yeah, so it's next Wednesday. I think it's next Wednesday. I'm really, look at me. Yes, it is. My brain fog. Next Wednesday, 24th, 12:30 to 2:30 UK time. So it would be great to have some of you come along. So does anyone have any questions or insights or things that you are left with? It is nice to hear where you are with it. Or should we turn the recording off now and give it?
Yes. Before we turn the recording off, let me just tell everyone where my workshop is. It is on Sunday, Sunday the 21st, which is this coming Sunday at, I think it's actually at 9:30, and it's a 3-hour workshop. So 9:30 in the morning, this coming Sunday, the 21st of November, understanding endometriosis and PCOS. And as I said, the 2 links will be in the comments below. So I'm going to turn off the recording, but if women want to chat, then we may also need to come out of Facebook. But someone just asked about the workshop information. The workshop information is available at the Yoga Teachers Forum website. And Jane and I will put both links to the workshop in the comments
I'll just
here in Zoom, and also on Facebook. We'll put the links there also. Anything else that we want to add, Jane, before we go?
I just wondered if anyone has any. I'm just getting the link for mine. If you want to.
Yes, I'm also.
Any. Let me just shove that in there. Any insights, any questions? Are we stopping the recording?
I've stopped the recording, but we're still going live on Facebook.
Should we stop the live just to see if anyone here just wants a bit of...
Okay, so goodbye, Facebook universe. Thank you for joining us. It's been great. You can reach Jane or myself directly. We're both on Facebook. Thanks everyone for joining us.